Hey everybody, I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSE Squared podcast.
Hey everybody, Mark and Steve on the PBSE podcast. We're excited for today's topic. It's been quite a while since we did something on what does real recovery look like, right? What does it look like to be in actual recovery? What can and should partners be asking for and expecting? What's the whole side of the street for an addict in recovery? Been a while since we did a real tight focus like that. So we had a really awesome submission come in from a partner. And it's kind of lengthy, but I think it's so well expressed that we really just had to read it. So I'm going to read it and then we're going to jump into this thing. So here's what she says. I've been listening and learning from your podcast for a little over 2 years. And I want to thank you both for your knowledge, compassion, and vulnerability. Many of your words of advice have helped me stay afloat and navigate my life with so much betrayal from my husband. And thank you so much for those words. We're all about what you're describing. It's why we're here.
Absolutely.
As I type this, I am just mentally exhausted. My husband and I have been married for almost 23 years, and his sexual addiction has worn me out and made me feel alone. I have known about his addiction with porn and sexual content for most of our marriage, but in the beginning didn't realize it was an addiction. And he used to hide. Didn't realize it was an addiction he used to hide and what he used to cope with his avoided emotions. We followed a lot of the usual cycle with addiction. Me finding out, uncovering his secret, him showing remorse and saying he was sorry and would change, to things being good for a while, and then rinse and repeat. A couple of years ago, he had an affair. We've been working the last 2 years to rebuild our trust and connection. We had built a stronger connection together spiritually, physically, intellectually, and emotionally, but now I feel it's all falling apart. I've caught him looking at sexual content on social media and choosing to watch sexually explicit shows. Some would say this isn't porn, but it's a gateway for my husband. He knows it's hurtful to me. He's stepping over boundaries, and I feel unloved and devalued. I've worked hard through prayer, self-reflection, trying to understand him with compassion, all while dealing with my own heartbreak and trauma, including the death of my father. I feel we are in the rinse and repeat cycle again, and I don't know if I can make it this time. I love my husband and I want us to be connected in every way, but that is difficult when his words don't align with his actions and when trust is continually broken. He has robbed me of the freedom to love him completely and taken away my safety. This has left me feeling hopeless, sad, and resentful. I don't want these feelings to harden my heart. He keeps saying how much he loves me and that he's trying. He had been going to a counselor, but stopped due to the expense. He listens to podcasts, has gotten closer with God through prayer and learning God's word, and I'm thankful. But I'm still left with wanting to see a real recovery plan. How do I get through to him on leading out, taking charge of his recovery, and conveying the damage he does to me and our marriage when his words don't match his actions? I'm triggered and drowning here. And he just wants to throw out, I'm sorry, I love you, I'll do better, and then move on. He's been saying he's really trying for over 2 years, but still making hurtful choices that are putting us away from being connected. I'm tired and want to be able to love my husband freely without having to watch my back all the time. We have a beautiful family that I want to save and protect. Thank you for any answers or knowledge you can share. Sincerely, heartbroken and exhausted wife.
Really, really well conveyed.
Wow.
um,
Wow.
everything that she's feeling and everything that she's thinking. And we really do appreciate and applaud what she's doing. You can hear, frankly, a lot in the submission, a lot of recovery lingo and talk. I don't know if that's just listening to the podcast or she's done some therapy, her own therapy, but definitely hear a lot of change and a lot of good ownership there, but also of feelings, but also of, look, I know I can't change these things. Where do we go from here? And I, I'm glad we read this whole submission today. It is on the long side, but this, as I'm sitting here just going through it, I mean, I read it a few times before we got on here today, but this could have been written by my wife 12 years ago,
Yeah. Yeah.
almost word for word.
Mine too. Mine too.
Just the desperation and the frustration and I've tried everything. I've tried to love and be supportive, and I'm just maxed. And that's very much where Brittany and for Mark Ladon, that's where they got. Our marriages were both very much on the brink of ending, not because of a lack of love, but because of a complete lack of connection, lack of trust, and lack of safety.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And
and we, yeah,
as I read this, Steve, you and I have talked about all the time in our Dare to Connect program on these PBSE podcasts. We are just blown away by the amazing, courageous partners out there. Lots and lots of partners, unfortunately, facing similar situations to this one. And we're just amazed at the incredible capacities for love, for devotion, for resilience that these betrayed partners have. And having said all that, these partners, your reserves are not inexhaustible.
no, they're
And
not.
you don't deserve, nor should you endlessly hang in there. And so, what do you do? What do you do with these situations?
Yeah. Well, and your background, this partner, your background, and listening to this podcast for all those others listening, we talk extensively on this podcast and we do a lot of work with partners about finding your voice, being your authentic self, sharing things that need to be shared rather than things that the
Mm-hmm.
other person might want to hear, and that all comes into play and applies here. Um, and the balance, we know there's a balance for you partners between your own wants and needs, but speaking with your authentic voice and then setting up boundaries, and also with the family and things hanging in the balance. But having said all that, what we would say is that if there is, or right now in Dare to Connect, we're talking about defense mechanisms, and we're just getting into solutions and how to tackle defense mechanisms and replace toxic defense mechanisms with healthy self-advocacy. And so
Mm-hmm.
we're very much talking about this whole concept that we're talking about today of making sure that even though there's a tactful way to do it, I need to be lovingly finding and expressing my voice, because that is the only way to truly empower the other people in this relationship, specifically in this case my partner. It's the only way to empower him to know what is truly on the line. Every time he makes he either takes an action or doesn't take an action that deepens the distrust. Or if he takes positive actions, it's important that partners are finding their voice and they're consistently saying, hey, today for our check-in, I want you to know these three things were really helpful, and this is how they were helpful for me, but these three things were devastating, and they pushed me a little bit further away from this relationship, and they pushed me a little more into that hopeless space, right? And it's important to be finding that voice and conveying I guess you could say in this case, the cumulative damage, right, that has
Mm-hmm.
happened here.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's no secret, we addicts, one of our main defense mechanisms, again, we're talking about this in D2C, is compartmentalization. We get very, very good at kind of isolating in a box individual instances of relapse or individual instances of indiscretion or whatever, and we get so good at it, in fact, that it's very easy for us to get angry or defensive or even resentful at a partner when they start expressing their pain. Well, what do you mean you're completely, you feel like it's square one? In fact, we addressed a question just like this today on the program.
Yes, we
What do you
did.
mean you feel like you're at square one? Don't you see all the other 15 things I do? And it's not that those things aren't seen, but when you really start to understand how trauma works in the brain, as with just like with trust and trauma have an inverse relationship with each other. I can tear down in seconds what it takes months, weeks, and years to build.
Yeah.
And for many partners, it's important that they not let off of that gas pedal, so to speak, in terms of informing them of, hey, this is where I really am. Hey, I know we talked about this yesterday, and I'm not here to make you change, but I am here to make sure that you know the impact that your choices are making. Your choices are yours to own. But I'm not going to be in this relationship and give you an out in terms of hearing the hard,
Yeah.
because that's
Well,
that's that's my authentic self. So
and one of the things, Steve, we've saw this with our own partners. We see this with so many betrayed partners out there after what often amounts to decades of betrayal, decades of holding down the fort, not being truly seen or heard. It's really hard for partners to even start to get into this space of how do I get into sync and identify my authentic wants and needs in this relationship when they've been neglected for so long? How do I get in tune with what my wants and needs are? And then how do I hold boundaries around those as
yeah,
opposed to just staying on the same track and the same rinse and repeat cycle? It's so critical for partners to say, here's what I want and need, and I'm starting to get in tune with that and find my voice for it. And here are the boundaries I'm creating and setting around those, so that because I'm not willing to live in this place of neglect and holding down the fort and just going it. I'm not willing to live in that place anymore. I have legitimate wants and needs, and here are the boundaries around them. And I hope that you can do your recovery and get into the space where you can start to, attend to those. But here's what it is for me going forward.
yeah,
That's one of the very first things we take betrayed partners through. What are your wants and needs, and what are the boundaries to put around those so that they begin to be met? Or if they aren't met, then you start to build up those boundaries around yourself, and until finally you ask yourself, okay, when do things become unsustainable, unacceptable, and eventually completely incompatible?
yeah. And a few quick suggestions for that, because we got lots to cover in this podcast today. But one thing that we might suggest to a partner in this situation is make sure that you are dialed up consistently 100% on your own individual recovery efforts. But as far as investment in the relationship goes, it might be appropriate to consider dialing that back to the level that mirrors what your partner is putting in.
Yeah.
And saying, I'd like to invest more, but I am not able or willing to do so until you don't just express amends. You need to do the work to figure out what's making you tick, because as Brittany said to me once upon a time, this what you're doing isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
You can advocate, and I was a therapist at the time. Most of you know that. I mean, I had excuses up the yin yang for all the reasons why Brittany was wrong and I was right and whatever. But the inescapable, unavoidable fact that I had to face in the mirror, and Brittany kind of lovingly held that mirror up for me, is at the end of the day, talk is great, but here are the results. We keep ending up back here. And we can't keep doing this, because I don't know if I have another one of these in me, husband.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to figure out what is causing this. And until you are willing to do that, apologies and saying that you're sorry, and short-term change, even as great as those are not sufficient for us to continue.
No, they're not. Because
So
part of the real challenge with this is, and you can hear in her submission, she really does want to support her addict partner. She does. She has. She's gone beyond the bounds. She's really, and I love the balance of her submission. She's obviously exhausted, hurt, heartbroken, but she really does a good job of owning her side of things and how much she tries to own her own side and do her own work and really support him. She says, I love him. I want this to work. I want us to be connected. You can just hear the yearning in her. She's not just dumping this whole relationship. She's trying hard and has for 23 years.
yes.
But how does a partner support her addict partner without sacrificing her own sovereignty and her own authenticity? Where does her part end and his part start?
Well, I think that's what we're talking about, right? It's
Yep.
this idea of, look, I'm going to keep working on being the best, most authentic partner I can be, but I am going to limit the amount of investment I am putting into this relationship until you can meet me there. To
Yeah,
borrow
because
from
what does she say? She says, I'm exhausted.
yeah.
I'm exhausted.
And by the way, what I said before, that boundary that I said, and the one we're talking about now about investing less, I want to be clear for any addicts listening to this. That is not, I'm not suggesting that in any way, shape, or form as a punitive action. This
Hmm.
isn't a, hey, you've been mean to me, so I'm going to pull back. That is the best option for a partner to preserve this relationship, because part of what's going on is this partner is bleeding out for her husband. And she's going to bleed herself dry from a place of love until there's nothing left to give. And then you enter scary territory, because now the relationship really is in peril,
Yeah.
and it may not be salvageable at that point.
Yeah. And if,
That energy is so precious, and it's critical that a partner is conserving that for her and only investing that if it's going somewhere productive when it comes to the relationship.
and if you, if as an addict in recovery or wanting to be in recovery or partly in recovery, if you really understand how this works, you would literally go to your partner and say, I want you to reduce your investment until I can up my game to do my part. Because if you keep investing most of this and I keep investing so little, this is over.
Yeah,
Because
it
you
will
will
be.
bleed out and you will exhaust. And I don't want to see that happen as an addict in recovery.
Yeah.
Right. It's so important to see that for what it is. So as we look at all this, as we talked about the partner side, what's the addict side?
Mm,
And
yeah.
Steve, as you and I looked at this, we know all too well, what it's like to choose, and I use that word intentionally. We as addicts choose to stay caught in the "I'm sorry, I'll do better" cycle.
We
Boy,
invented that
boy,
cycle.
it's like in that cycle, decades, man. And boy, is there a lot to say about that. All the reasons we stay in that cycle, the fear, the power of the addiction, just how it shackles us in pure slavery, and why we stay in the sorry, I'm sorry, I'll do better. But what does real recovery look like?
Mm-hmm.
What is it? Because this is what she's asking for. I'm looking for real recovery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that involves answering a couple of hard questions on the addict side, and we know how difficult these can be. But the first is really taking a look at this. And I mean, when I first meet with a client, I do this exercise with guys when they come into my, well, now I meet with people virtually, but we used to do it on my whiteboard back in the day. And I will ask them the following question: outside of an orgasm, the chemical pleasure and the feel good and naked bodies rock and all that stuff, what does acting out do for you?
Yeah.
Right? Let's talk about that. Like, of course, there's the pleasure side, and that's true. That's a huge piece of this, but it is much bigger than that. There are lots of ways to get pleasure. That is not the only reason why a sane human brain elects to put this kind of stuff on the line. We have to look at the other things, right? What things, for example, does it allow me to escape or to avoid? What feelings or emotions does it allow me to distance myself from or to numb out?
Mm-hmm.
In what ways does it cause me to feel strong and powerful when I feel weak and powerless in my life? In what ways does it cause me to feel wanted and desired in a world where my own internal dialogue, as well as possibly my perceived dialogue from others, convinces me on a daily basis that I'm not wantable or not lovable?
In my case, a big part of starting to look at that and own it was, what are the many immaturities, ways that I did not grow up and progress from when I was a kid and a teenager? In what ways have those immaturities continued forward into my adult life and are continuing to manifest in my addiction behaviors? That was a huge, difficult facing it. Wow, Mark, these are a lot of ways that you never grew up, right? You're
Yeah.
same pleasure seeking and easy outs and all the rest of it that you did when you were 14 years old. Holy smokes! And I'm 52. I just facing what these things are. And the other side, Steve, that you and I talk about all the time is, as addicts, where is our intention? Okay, this wife submitted this. She's obviously expressing this to this guy. So how is he interpreting all of this? what's his purpose? What's the meaning? What's the motivation now for him? You know what? I got to get this woman off my back. I got to do whatever's needed to get us, quote, back to normal. So I'm going to check the boxes. I'm going to do whatever I got to do. And man, maybe this will blow over. Maybe we can just get things back to even Steven here. Is that why you're in this? We talk about the readiness for change. Where is your readiness for change in this whole process? Are you going to do this for you? Are you finally seeing that there's a true, authentic, higher, better self in there, and you're sick and tired of not living up to that? I know for me, that was a big place where I finally started to do this for the better reasons. I was sick and tired of being an imposter, sick and tired of escaping, avoiding, and going into addiction as my way to cope with all the hard stuff of life. I was just sick of not, quote, being me. I just hated it. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to be me.
Well, and that's, I think, where that healthy selfishness piece comes into play that we talk about often, right? I mean, addiction is a toxically selfish action and endeavor all on its own. So let's look at the healthily selfish side. Let's ask ourselves, right? What is really in it for me? If I'm an addict who's in recovery to some degree, it's always good to spot check or to ask ourselves these questions, whether you're at the beginning of the process or a long ways in. What are my current motivations? Am I pursuing just more escape? So, for example, am I trying to get my spouse off my back? That's I own fully. That is the first time I ever went to a 12-step meeting was that exact reason. That'll shut Brittany up because now I'm working on it, quote unquote, so I can just keep doing my thing.
Yeah.
Am I trying to deflect? Am I trying to right? And then also asking yourself that hard question of, is this life the one that I really want to live? As I look back over the consequences, the outcomes of my actions, not just on my partner. I mean, in some ways, I even recommend to clients or to recommend all of you, set aside your partner for a second and don't even pursue the partner guilt. Ask yourself, just in your life, are you where you want to be? Is this pattern getting you where you want to go? How is this impacting your self-confidence, your self-worth? How is that in turn showing up in your job, your parenting, your other relationships, your everything, right?
Yeah.
Those are the questions we need to ask ourselves if we're going to really start being honest and then looking towards that cultivation of gradually moving motivation away from doing this for the externals, including for our partner, and towards what we call the internals, meaning the reasons, the reasons inside of me that are sustainable, that I can control, that don't deviate or shift or oscillate, and doing this because I deserve it, because I am worth it, because those kinds of reasons.
I love those reasons you just said. I mean, I got to the place. In fact, I would ask all the guys struggling here, do you ever have that little voice that's kind of in the back of your head or coming from your heart or your core, say in your moments of clarity or reason, man, I'm better than this. I deserve more than this. Is this where I want to be stuck the rest of my life? Right? I used to say, am I going to be 85 years old and have a heart attack while I'm masturbating to porn? And I know that's a pretty raw thing for me to say, but I have to tell you, I started to wonder about that. Will this be my destiny? And is that really, am I going to settle for that? I started to really question that. Yeah.
These, and we know, guys, it takes a lot of bravery, it takes a lot of courage to look at these things, but we would encourage you to start. And like I said, if you've started this, to re-examine, because these are the kind of questions we should all be asking ourselves in the process, whether you've been sober for 10 minutes or 10 years. This is what we need to be looking at. So as we kind of wrap up here, we've given some great starting points for addicts and for partners. What do we recommend kind of as a collective whole going forward? Well, those who've attended this for a while probably can guess what we're going to say, but we want to tell you why. And this is not just a self-serving plug. It's really the honest. This is why we've created Dare to Connect, is because it is the best alternative that we would sincerely recommend. If there were other ones, we'd have either founded or financially invested in those, but we've created this because we do feel that strongly about it. Our Dare to Connect program meets the needs of so much of what this partnership described. They talk about, he was initially working with a therapist, but then we stopped it because of expense. The Dare to Connect program, as it stands right now, it costs between 1 and 2 therapy sessions per month for both of you as a coupleship combined. We deliberately priced it that way because we want people to financially get the best bang for their buck. We know that the world is trending economically, not in a great way, and has been for some time. And therapy rates are going up for Mark. They're going up in my clinic. They're going up for everyone. And in this day and age of changing and shifts that way, we have a set price point that we've designed to be economically viable. Of course, in a perfect world, it would be great to pair Dare to Connect with having a therapist involved, and that would be optimal. But we know that for many, that is not possible. And I can tell you hands down, the program that we have created, I say this without reservation, we will never shoot crooked with you here on this program. If I had to triage between therapy and this, during most of my recovery, barring a few exceptions and a few direct intervention times, I would have chosen this if I had to choose, because what you're getting here is you're getting so much of what we addicts need for sustainable change. This wife talks about how he gets good for a while, he invests, and then he shifts back. This is a program where you tag team or renew with your recovery work and with us and with other people doing your recovery work 4 times a week minimum.
Yeah, we're talking 6 hours of interaction with 2 therapists every week, 6 hours a week with
Yes.
detailed assignments and detailed follow-up and the ability to write in with questions about what you're facing in the trenches trying to do this. Steve, I remember when you and I sat down years ago to start to envision this, one of the biggest things that was so frustrating to us as therapists, I remember the conversation we had. We looked at each other and said, man, what is the big missing link in all of this? It's the fact that when we have clients in the therapy office and we're with them and we're talking and we're engaging and it all sounds fantastic and they're so good and they're ready to go in that session. And then it all goes to crap between now and the next session.
Yeah.
How do we fill the gap? And what Dare to Connect was all about filling the gap.
How do we play off of those light bulbs?
Yeah, the 6 days where they don't have us as a therapist. What's happening in the 6 days till the next session?
Minimum. Or if you're triaging therapy, you're doing it like every other week, right?
Yeah, every other week. And it was the gaps, the real world trenches where everything would fall apart and they come back to the therapy session again and then everything would be good. And then I felt like parents sending your child out into the real world and you're just petrified. Oh God, I got to send them out there now.
Well, they're going to get beat up by outside temptation. They're going to get beat up by outside sources. They're going to get beat up by outside traumas and all those other things. And Dare to Connect, we have worked very hard and continue to work very hard to create a live, interactive place where you can interact with others in your same scenario right now in real time. You've got 2 therapists who happen to be addicts in long-term successful recovery. We provide live, interactive answers to your questions. As we jokingly but seriously say on the podcast all the time, we can get to your questions within the next 1 to 3 months on the podcast, or we can get back to you on Wednesday in Dare to Connect, right? There are just the 12-step support that we provide. We provide safe, professionally facilitated 12-step groups that we don't allow to get off into the weeds that like some fellowships sometimes tragically do. We teach a culture of empowerment that is all about focusing on what you can change and your locus and focus of control and what can you do differently and where does it begin with me and where does it end, just like this partner literally asked. Yeah. And so if you can find another program like that, we would recommend that too, but this is the best one that we have found. That's the one that we made. We hope that you'll come and join us at Dare to Connect. If you haven't, please come grab a free 2-week trial. Try it for 2 weeks. See what you think.
And we know that also a really important part of this to mention, because Steve, you and I, we had a really concerned eye to this part of our program. A lot of people their schedules won't harmonize with when we have our live sessions. So we have live sessions every Monday, Wednesday, and Monday for addicts, Wednesday for partners, and Friday for couples, 10 a.m. Mountain Time here in the U.S. probably a good 2/3 of our subscribers worldwide can't make those time frames.
We have subscribers on nearly every inhabited continent on the planet right now in Dare to Connect.
So we record everything during
Yeah.
those sessions. All assignments are put in written form inside the subscriber part of our site. So all of you who say, well, I can't make those live sessions. Great. Join the 2/3 of our people who can't,
Yep.
but they listen recorded. They listen as a coupleship recorded. They look at all the assignments. They write questions into us, and then we answer those in the live sessions and record them so that you can listen to the answers recorded. So we bend over backwards to reach everybody, no matter what your circumstances, where you are on the planet, no matter what time zone you're in. It doesn't matter. We've tried to accommodate everybody.
Yeah. Well, we hope that you will come and join us. It's every year, Mark and I talk about this. The holidays are coming up.
Oh boy.
And they are still triggering for me. I'll be honest with all of you. I mean, they're still triggering in good ways, but also in hard ways. And one of the hard ways is how many years, and Mark and I reflect on this all the time, how many years each of us in our different ways, and we know you addicts, we know you well, we've been you, how we have told ourselves, okay, this next year, it's going to be different. I'm going to have a last hurrah through the end of the year, and come January 1st, right? I'm going to, and you launch into all of this with all this really well-intended, honest desire for change.
Yeah, for sure.
But without the structure, without the resources, what happens? It fails and fizzles, just like this partner described. Let 2025 be the year where you're done with this. Break free of this and be done. Move on. That is what we have found. I just celebrated 10 years of sobriety 3 weeks ago. We can help you to move forward and move on. You deserve better. Your marriage deserves better. Give your family the best gift you possibly could, which is the gift of not just sobriety, although that's a huge start, but of long-term recovery. Because giving them the gift of recovery is giving them the gift of your authentic self, which is what they are, I guarantee you, are begging for.
I agree. Yeah, the gift of healthy living, healthy relationships. Right. Love it.
Well, you can find all the information on that and find that and grab that 2-week trial at daretoconnectnow.com. There's also a contact form there where you can send us questions. And if you would like to send questions, as always, to the podcast, if you go to daretoconnectnow.com, you can just click up at the banner up at the top. There's a link there. It's pretty prominent, and depending on what device you're accessing it on, it's in big, ugly PBSE red, so it's very obvious.
Actually, I think our tech people changed it to black now, so it's not as obnoxious.
Okay, so it's black now. Maybe we got rid of the obnoxiousness, but you'll see the PBSE logo there. If you click on that, that just takes you to the old PBSE page, Porn, Betrayal, Sex, and the Experts podcast, and just at the bottom is a contact form where you can send us questions for the podcast.
Yep, either way.
We love all of you. Thank you for being here.
Yep. Thanks for being here. All you addicts in recovery, partners in healing. Look forward to the next episode with you, and look forward to seeing those of you who can to come on over to D2C. We'd love to spend more one-on-one and more focused attention and time with you. So
absolutely. Have a great week, everybody. We'll catch you next time.
See ya.
Everything expressed on the PBSE podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.